you ever identified a real problem in your community? A slow internet connection that makes remote work impossible, a lack of digital spaces for young entrepreneurs, or a policy being decided without asking the digital generation what they think, and felt powerless to change it? Or spoken up about something that mattered to you and felt like your voice simply disappeared into the room, heard by no one, changing nothing? You are not alone. This video is about changing that. By the end, you will understand how rural development policies are shaped, where influence is actually possible, and how to turn a community problem into a clear goal that decision-makers cannot ignore. Advocacy isn't a complaint. It isn't a petition that goes nowhere. It's a structured, ethical, democratic process that rural young people can use right now to push for real change where they live.
Before we get into the practical steps, it is worth being clear about what advocacy actually means and how it differs from other forms of engagement. Participation, as we explored in Module 3, is about being part of existing governance processes, attending meetings, joining advisory bodies, contributing to consultations. Participation works within the system as it currently exists. Advocacy goes a step further. It is what you do when the system is not working, when the right processes are not happening, when decision-makers are not listening, or when a problem is not even recognized as a problem by those with power. Advocacy is about pushing from outside a decision, or pushing to open a decision that seemed closed. Advocacy can be done alone, but it is almost always stronger when done collectively. A single young person raising a concern can be easy to dismiss. A group of young people presenting evidence, backed by an organization and a clear proposal, is much harder to ignore. Advocacy is also democratic by nature. It does not seek to bypass institutions or force change through pressure alone. It aims to make the case, clearly, ethically, persistently, for why a decision or policy needs to change. So advocacy is not protest alone, though protest can be part of it. It is not lobbying in the negative sense, though formal lobbying techniques can be useful. It is the organized, ethical effort to influence decisions that affect your community.
To advocate effectively, you need to understand the policies you are trying to influence. That means understanding how rural development policies work. Rural development policies are the decisions made by governments, local, national, and European, about how to invest in and support rural territories. They cover a huge range of areas: agriculture and land use, infrastructure and transport, education and health services, economic development and employment, housing, environment, and youth services. These policies are shaped by political priorities, available budgets, expert advice, and sometimes citizen pressure. They are not written in stone. They change in response to evidence, elections, and advocacy. That is the crucial point. Rural development policies are made by people and can be changed by people. In many European countries, rural policies are influenced at multiple levels simultaneously. National governments set broad frameworks and budgets. Regional authorities adapt these for their specific contexts. Local municipalities implement them on the ground, and at European level, programs like the Common Agricultural Policy shape the conditions within which national and local decisions are made. Understanding which level of decision-making is most relevant to your specific issue is one of the first things effective advocates do. If your issue is about how EU farming subsidies work, you probably need to engage at national or European level. If it is about how your municipality allocates its youth budget, you work locally. And sometimes an issue connects multiple levels at once. Think about a specific problem in your community. which level of government is primarily responsible for it? Is the decision mostly made locally, nationally, or at European level?
One of the most important skills in advocacy is the ability to translate a problem into a goal. These are not the same thing, and the difference matters enormously. A problem is something wrong. Young people are leaving the village because there is no work, no transport, and nothing to do. A problem is real and important, but it is too broad and too vague to advocate around. Decision makers cannot respond to a general problem. They need to respond to a specific ask. An advocacy goal is a specific, achievable change that you are asking for. For example, we are asking the municipality to restore the twice-weekly bus service between our village and the town because this directly affects the ability of young people to access employment, healthcare, and further education. Notice the difference. The goal names the specific change, identifies who is responsible, and connects it to clear consequences. It is much easier to say yes or no to that kind of request. And if the answer is no, decision makers need to explain why, which is also useful. A good advocacy goal has several qualities. It is specific. It describes exactly what should change. It is achievable. It does not demand the impossible. It is time-bound. It has a sense of when change should happen. And it is connected to evidence. It is based on facts, not just feelings. Getting to a good advocacy goal often requires a step back before you move forward. That means listening carefully to your community, gathering evidence about the real scale and impact of the problem, and thinking realistically about what is actually within the power of your target institution to change.
Once you have a clear advocacy goal, the next step is turning it into a policy proposal. This is where many young advocates feel uncertain, because proposals sound formal and technical. But the core of a good proposal is actually straightforward. A policy proposal is simply a structured argument that says, here's the problem, here's why it matters, here is what we are asking for, and here is why we think it will work. The first part, the problem, draws on evidence. That evidence can come from many sources. Statistics and official data are useful, but so is documented lived experience. If 10 young people write 2 paragraphs each about how the loss of the bus service has affected their lives, that is evidence. Qualitative evidence, real stories, real impacts, often connects with decision makers more powerfully than numbers alone. The second part, why it matters, connects your specific issue to wider policy priorities. Governments respond more readily when your proposal aligns with goals they have already committed to. If your municipality has a strategic plan mentioning youth retention, you can frame your bus service proposal as directly supporting that goal. If the national government has committed to rural inclusion, your proposal fits within that framework. The third part, what you are asking for, is your specific, clear request. Be concrete, be realistic, and where possible, make it easy for the institution to say yes by suggesting a mechanism, a timeline, or a budget figure. The fourth part, why it will work, is where you anticipate objections and address them. If cost is likely to be raised as a barrier, research what similar interventions have cost elsewhere, or propose a phased or partial solution. Showing that you have thought through the practical challenges makes your proposal much harder to dismiss.
Advocacy involves working with decision makers, and that relationship is more nuanced than it might appear. It is not simply about confrontation or pressure. It also requires understanding, respect, and sometimes patience. Most decision makers are not your enemies. They are people operating within complex institutional systems with limited resources, competing priorities, and political constraints. Understanding their position does not mean agreeing with them, but it does make you a more effective advocate. One important thing to understand is institutional logic. Local counselors need to balance multiple competing needs. Civil servants must operate within legal and procedural frameworks. Ministers and elected officials are accountable to their parties and constituents, not just to you. When you understand these constraints, you can make proposals that are easier for institutions to act on. Constructive engagement with authorities involves several practical elements: requesting meetings and being well prepared for them, bringing clear written materials, a one-page summary of your proposal, or a brief evidence document, following up after meetings with written summaries and next steps, and maintaining a respectful but persistent tone, showing that you are serious, organized, and not going away. There is also a place for pressure when constructive engagement stalls. Public campaigns, media engagement, petitions, and mobilizing community support can all create external pressure that shifts the internal calculation within an institution. But the most effective advocates combine constructive dialogue with selective public pressure, escalating only when dialogue has genuinely failed. Think about a decision maker in your community you would like to engage. What are their likely priorities and constraints? What would make your proposal easier for them to support?
One of the most underused resources in youth advocacy is the simplest one: lived experience. Rural young people have direct knowledge of what it is like to grow up in places that are often underserved, underfunded, and underrepresented in policy conversations. That knowledge is not just personal, it is a form of territorial expertise that no outside consultant or distant policymaker can replicate. But lived experience needs to be communicated strategically to have policy impact. There is a difference between sharing a personal story in a conversation and presenting lived experience as structured evidence in an advocacy context. When you use lived experience as advocacy evidence, you make it specific, representative, and connected to policy. Specific means naming concrete impacts. Representative means showing that your experience is shared. And connected to policy means linking your experience to the decisions and frameworks that shape it. This does not mean numbers are always necessary. A well-documented set of personal testimonies, consistently told across multiple advocacy contexts, can be just as powerful. What matters is that the experience is presented, not just implied, and that it connects clearly to what needs to change and why. Think about your own lived experience and the experiences of others around you. How can you present them as clear, structured evidence that supports your advocacy goal?
No effective advocacy campaign is built by one person alone. Building a team, even a small, informal one, makes advocacy stronger, more sustainable, and more credible. A basic advocacy team might include people who research and gather evidence, people who can write proposals and communications, people with relationships in the community and with institutions, and people who can organize public actions or campaigns when needed. These roles don't require titles or formal positions, just commitment and responsibility. Beyond your core team, coalition building matters. Who else cares about this issue? Community organizations, local businesses, farming families, parent groups, school boards, environmental associations. All can share your concern. Building a coalition, even an informal one, broadens your base and makes your advocacy harder to dismiss. Working with established organizations, including youth NGOs and civil society groups, can also provide important resources: legal knowledge, communication support, funding, and connections to wider networks. Many rural youth advocacy campaigns succeed because they connect with a larger organization that can open doors and amplify their message. Collective action also builds something beyond the immediate campaign. When young people work together on advocacy, they develop skills, build relationships, and create social infrastructure that outlasts any single campaign. The team you build around an advocacy goal is itself a form of community development. Who could be part of your team, and what strengths could they bring?
Let's close with a documented example of rural youth advocacy that produced concrete results from the EACEA network's Good Practice database. In the leader territory known as From the Bergisches Land to the Sieg in North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, a leader-funded project was built around a simple idea. Young people should help shape the places where they grow up. In Neunkirchen-Seelscheid, young people helped design a new youth center through an externally facilitated workshop. In Windeck, 8th grade students developed project ideas that were financed through a dedicated youth budget. What made these projects work was not just participation itself, but the combination of three things: a recognized structure for young people to contribute, a direct link between their proposals and real resources, and close collaboration between the local action group, municipalities, schools, and youth centers. The result boosted young people's self-confidence and their long-term motivation to engage in their communities. It created conditions for them to learn by doing and to see their ideas become real outcomes. That is what meaningful advocacy looks like in rural practice.
So the message at the end of this video is this: advocacy is not for experts, and it is not for later. It is a democratic tool that rural young people can pick up now with what they already know and what they can organize together. Here are 3 concrete actions you can take starting now. First, identify one specific problem in your community that affects young people, like a digital gap or a missing space to innovate, and express it as a specific advocacy goal. Ask yourself, who has the power to change it, and what exactly would you ask them to do? Second, gather at least 3 pieces of evidence about the impact of that problem, whether statistics, personal testimonies, or documented examples from other communities. Third, identify one other young person or youth organization in your area to share your goal with. Advocacy starts with one problem, one goal, and one team. Because remember, participation is the heartbeat of a healthy community, but advocacy is its voice. When you step forward, you are not just asking for a better internet connection or a new building. You are claiming your place in the democratic process. Being young in a rural area is not a disadvantage to overcome. It is a perspective the future of our democracy cannot afford to ignore. Don't wait for a seat at the table. Start with one problem. Define one goal. Build one small team. And begin.